Nicole is the multi-talented, intelligent half of Reef Watch. As my own daughter and others have often commented, all I ever seem to do for work is talk. All Nicole ever seems to do is work. So it's nice to have her to talk. Since being awarded a PhD from the University of Adelaide, she's worked in a variety of fields where she's occasionally had the opportunity to flex her amazing communication skills. She's an amazing artist. This year's logo, last year's logo, the year before's logo, all the Sea Slug Census logos have all been done by Nicole. Our Marine Life of Victoria board game has 64 illustrations, all done by Nicole. And she also makes incredible nudie models. And by that, I mean nudie branks. There's every chance there's probably one sitting on her desk there. She's also a fantastic science communicator and an incredibly awesome person to work next to. I'm honoured to introduce Nicole to bring us up to speed with last year's and this year's fish count.
Thanks, Kate. Thanks for setting the bar pretty high. If I can meet it. Okay, I'm just going to jump right in. I am used to condensing a 15-minute talk down to like 7 minutes or so because I'm usually doing the tail end of the things. I'll try not to speak too quickly, but yeah, as Kate said, if you do need to jump out, I won't be offended. But to kick it off, the dive that counts, the fish count. 20 years ago, some curious divers started making observations of what they were seeing when they were underwater. And this did evolve into a targeted list of species of fish that groups were encouraged to go out and record at a specific time of year. And some of you will recognise this as the Great Victorian Fish Count. There's been a few iterations of the species that we've studied, but pretty soon 25 common and not so common fish not typically, I guess, targeted by recreational or commercial interests were selected as the official fish count. And in 2017, we added, I was going to say 10 sharks and rays, but I should probably say 9 sharks and rays and 1 chimera to that list. And what this means is that our citizen scientists, like, they don't need an encyclopedic knowledge of all the fish that exist in Victorian waters. They can just focus on these species. And then we have a consistent list of certain species that we can compare to from year to year. Most clubs have actually adopted, I guess, like a regular site, be it their local marine sanctuary or a pier or something, and they return to it every year. And so all in all, it gives us a snapshot of the fish occurring in places along the Victorian coast each year and a bit of an estimate of their general abundance. All right, so looking more specifically at last year's fish count, there was definitely a distinct sense of deja vu compared to the previous year, 2020. Many of us were unsure when we might be able to return to the water again about this time last year. The lockdowns for those of us still stuck in Melbourne were lifted with mere weeks to go before the fish count started, but I think everyone did a fantastic job to work within the health regulations and ensure that last year's count went off successfully and safely and responsibly. And from the looks of it, you all managed to actually have some fun too. I'd say that weather was a challenge, and I guess it's quite fitting tonight. We are in for another La Nina year, so it's probably best to expect this bit of the same. So I would say to anyone participating in a fish count, do make sure you're in touch with your local hosts this year so you can be aware of any scheduling changes. What we would say is that it's really great to see that a lot of clubs are registering multiple events. Just to clarify, once you're registered with us, you can actually run as many fish counts as you like within that window. And you may actually appreciate the buffer of having multiple survey dates locked in a year like this. But hopefully I'm all being doom and gloom and we actually have a nice sunny spring, summer. Let's go for that. All up, in 2021, we had 46 surveys lodged by 24 groups. It was slightly fewer than previous years, but I think it's still a fantastic effort considering everything that everyone was up against. So let's have a look at some data. In terms of the actual surveys themselves, we would say that there's still a bit of a skew towards surveys being conducted by divers, but snorkelers made up about 1/3 of the surveys undertaken, and there's a bit of a mix, like a few groups offering hybrid events, which is nice because it's still demonstrating that there's appeal for the younger fish counters and non-divers to get involved as well. Interestingly, last year was a bit of a dramatic shift in the location of fish count surveys in terms of the type of marine area being conducted. So in the past few years, about 30% of all surveys were conducted in marine protected areas like marine national parks or sanctuaries. But in 2021, this dropped to about 17%. I was sort of scratching my head about this. We might have to do a bit of a deeper dive, as it were, but we suspect it might have something to do with the fact that we did have an increase in dive clubs doing multiple surveys. And as many of you dive under things like piers and other artificial structures, more than say inside of marine sanctuaries, we think that might have made a bit of a difference. Certainly in the spirit of this year's fish count, we would encourage groups running multiple events to consider comparing their local site to, say, a nearby natural reef or other protected area, because you don't know what you might find. To the fish. For the bony fishes, once again, the blue throat wrasse reigns supreme. These lovely wrasses, as Michael alluded to, they're present across almost all survey locations and habitat types, and they have been for many, many years. This was followed by things like the magpie perch and zebrafish. Zebrafish had a bit of a bump in the overall percentage of surveys they were recorded in last year. Again, haven't really had a chance to get into the data to understand why, but there they were. Both leather jackets, so the horseshoe and the six spine leather jacket that we study, were actually cited kind of proportionally less than previous years. Leather jackets, you can see them under piers as well as on natural reefs. So again, not entirely sure what's going on there, a bit curious. Not exactly explained in that sort of split of location surveys that we saw. For a lot of the kind of, less often cited species, which are all those ones to the far end there, things like red wallongs and boarfish, a couple of the gropers, they tend to show a bit of a starker difference in how many surveys they were seen in compared to the rolling average of the last 5 or 6 years. But I would say that because they appear in far fewer surveys to begin with, it's a little harder to tease apart any trends there. For the target sharks and rays, smooth stingray was observed in the most surveys. Again, pretty much standard for the fish count. It is a common visitor to piers as well as shallow reefs within bays. And obviously it's pretty easy to spot, and some of them can be quite friendly. So no surprises with that one. However, many of the other sharks and ray species we observed didn't appear in the same proportion of surveys as previous years. The draftboard shark was the only one that people saw more of last year. But again, we're talking about a handful of surveys when we get down to these ones. Last year, nobody saw the varied carpet shark, which I'll get to in a minute, and no fish count to date has recorded our little elephant fish or ghost shark. But we might know why now. Obviously, that was really just a snapshot of a snapshot. So if you do want to dive deeper into the rest of the data, you can check out all of the reports that are online. We are a little bit late in getting the report for 2021 up, but please watch this space. Given the data from last year, it did make sense to us to have our varied carpet shark to be an ambassador, I guess, for the hidden gems of our marine environment this year. Well, I guess you could argue that the ghost shark could be the same. The theme Hidden Gems, I think, works on a few different levels. So whether it's celebrating those little gems that we know as our marine parks and sanctuaries, and I hope that people can recognize at least a few of these and be thinking about the next time they might get to go out and experience those, or the fish themselves. And we are encouraging everyone to keep their eyes peeled for this kind of panel of lesser seen fishy gems during this year's count, as well as any non-target but still equally captivating critters, things like handfish and velvet fish, because you can report those at the end of your survey as well if you do know what they were. And as of course, we're always interested to see whether anyone has seen these guys. We've now heard that maybe we won't see an elephant fish, but we could see a little one. But the other one there is a harlequin fish. This is a southern reef resident that is pretty common elsewhere, but is presumed not to be present in Victorian waters. We do hope one day we might see it. Given that the Western blue gropers were actually thought to be absent from Victorian waters until they started showing up in multiple fish counts, who knows? If you do think you have spotted a rare fish, a photo will go a long way to confirm that. So we do partner up with RedMap Australia on this. They've been gathering data on fish outside of their known range for the last 10 years as well. So that's another anniversary. You can upload your photos directly to RedMap. You can include them as additional sightings on the Atlas of Living Australia, or you could put them up for ID on iNaturalist, and that all gets fed into the same system. Gone through all of that, of course, it is the people who take time out of their schedules each year to explore their local patch that make this project and other citizen science projects possible. So the next few slides are just a celebration of our wonderful fish counters. The literal thousands of you at this point that have taken part since the fish count began. I will say that some photos feature people who are no longer with us. So if anyone thinks they need to duck out for a minute or so, this is just a heads up about that. I didn't want to diminish the contributions of these people and their long-term dedication to this project by leaving them out. On a lighter note, but still a warning, I have delved into the archives to complete this little slideshow. So if you have been involved in the fish count for many years, some of these images may shock you. So for me, the fish count isn't just about getting data on our lesser known species. It's also about opportunities to explore and connect with your local patch of reef, pier or seagrass beds. And most importantly, it's about the passionate citizen scientists, which is you guys, who participate each year and become ambassadors yourselves, I'd say, to kind of, promote the environment and get more and more people involved. So again, I just want to say thank you to everyone who has supported the fish count, whether it's by organising events yourselves as hosts, taking part in a survey or multiple surveys or one every year, as we can see a couple of recurring faces in these photos. Maybe it's standing on shore with barbecue tongs in hand, ready for when everyone gets out of the water. Coming along to nights like this or any other way that you've taken part. You guys really do make this project the success that it is. Got last slide here. So once again, thank you. And now an apology. This is a shameless plug for my other baby, the Sea Slug Census Program and the materials and resources that we've just recently published. Basically, it's just to help Victorians learn a little bit more about their local slug life. If you are interested in getting your hands on a copy, please either get in touch with myself or Cade. There'll be emails up in a second. In terms of the Sea Slug Census Project, if you have spotted a slug or something that you think is a slug between the 30th of September and the 9th of October, so just last week, please upload it to iNaturalist and it will count towards the National Census records. All right, that is it from me. Thanks again to everybody who has supported Reef Watch and the Fish Count for the last 20 years. You're all fantastic. I do hope to see you out there for the 2002 Fish Count. And that's it from me.
Fantastic.